6 months had passed since Siesta Key. 6 months since a summer reunion that was supposed to be simple turned into something none of them expected. 6 months since Nyla Bennett, the woman who almost canceled the trip, walked away from a Florida beach with a matte black card in her hand and a man's promise that he would call. He had called. And then he had kept calling. And now, on a cold Tuesday evening in December, Nyla was standing in her Atlanta apartment looking at herself in the bathroom mirror, trying to decide if the woman staring back at her was ready for what was about to happen. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She already knew who it was without looking. The text was simple. Direct. Exactly like him. I am downstairs. Take your time. She smiled at the phone. Not a big smile. The real one. The one that only came when she was alone or with people who had earned it. Min-jae had earned it. In the 6 months since Florida, he had earned it over and over again without ever demanding it. She picked up her coat, checked her reflection one more time, and walked out of her apartment. The car waiting outside was expensive in the way that did not need to announce itself. Dark. Quiet. Min-jae stepped out before the driver could open the door for her. He was wearing a dark coat over a fitted black sweater. His hair was slightly longer than it had been in Florida, just enough to notice. The geometric tattoos on his forearms were hidden by his sleeves now, but she knew they were there. She knew most things about him now. He did not say anything at first. He just looked at her the way he always looked at her. Like she was the answer to a question he had been asking for a long time. You look beautiful, he said. You always say that, she said. Because it is always true. She shook her head slightly, but she was smiling as she got into the car. The restaurant he had chosen was exactly right. Not the most expensive place in Atlanta. Not the place designed to impress people who needed impressing. It was a small Italian restaurant in a neighborhood she loved, the kind of place with soft lighting and handwritten menus and tables close enough together that you could hear other conversations if you wanted to. She had mentioned it once. Months ago. In a phone conversation that lasted 3 hours while he was in Singapore and she was eating takeout alone in her apartment. She had said, "There is this little Italian place near my apartment that I keep meaning to go back to. The pasta is extraordinary." And he had remembered. That was the thing about Min-jae. He remembered everything. They sat across from each other at a corner table, and for a while they just talked the way they always talked. Easy. Unhurried. Like people who had stopped performing for each other a long time ago. He told her about a project in Seoul that was finally coming together after months of complications. She told him about a community development proposal she had submitted that might actually get approved. He listened the way he always listened, with his full attention, like there was nothing else in the world he needed to be thinking about. Then, somewhere between the appetizer and the main course, something in the air shifted. He set down his glass. "Nyla," he said. The way he said her name. She would never get used to it. "I need to talk to you about something." She felt her stomach tighten slightly, but she kept her face calm. She was good at that. She had always been good at that. "Okay," she said. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Not a ring box. She noticed that immediately and felt something she could not quite name, relief and something else mixed together. He set the envelope on the table between them. "I am not asking you to marry me tonight," he said. "I want to be clear about that." She let out a small breath. "Good. Because that would be a lot for a Tuesday." He almost smiled. "What I am asking is bigger in some ways. And smaller in others." She looked at the envelope. "What is it?" "Open it." She picked up the envelope and slid it open. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded neatly. She unfolded it and read it slowly. It was a proposal. Not for marriage. For a position. A consulting role with his development company, specifically focused on community-centered urban planning for a new project he was launching in 3 cities. Atlanta, Miami, and Seoul. She read it twice to make sure she understood what she was seeing. Then she looked up at him. "You want me to work with you?" "I want you to work on something that matters," he said. "With complete creative authority over your division. With resources most urban planners never get access to. With the ability to actually change how communities are built instead of just proposing changes that get buried in committee." She stared at him. This is not a favor, he continued. I am not offering this because of us. I am offering this because I have watched you work for 6 months. I have read your proposals. I have listened to you talk about what you would do if you had real resources and real support. And I am in a position to provide both. She looked down at the paper again. The numbers were significant. The scope was significant. The opportunity was the kind of thing she had imagined in her most ambitious moments, but never actually expected to see. If you say no, he said quietly, nothing between us changes. I will still be here. I will still call. I will still fly to Atlanta every time my schedule allows. This is not a condition. It is an offer. And you have complete freedom to decline it. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, you know this complicates things. Yes. Working together. Being together. Those are different things that do not always work well in the same space. I know. People will talk. They will assume I got this because of you instead of because of my work. Let them assume, he said. You will prove them wrong with the results. You always do. She looked at him across the table. This man who had noticed her first when she helped an elderly waitress pick up dropped plates. Who had watched her walk in the rain without running and decided that meant something. Who had said what he said on a yacht because accuracy mattered more than social ease. Who had called when he said he would call, every single time, for 6 months. I need to think about it, she said. I know, he said. Take all the time you need. She folded the paper carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then she picked up her fork and continued eating. He watched her for a moment with something close to wonder. You are remarkable, he said quietly. You always say that too. Also always true. Later that night, after he had driven her home and walked her to her door and said goodnight in the way that always felt like a promise, Nyla sat alone in her apartment with the envelope on the kitchen table in front of her. She did not open it again. She already knew what it said. What she was trying to understand was what it would mean. Her phone buzzed. The group chat. Tasha had sent a photo of herself at some event in a dress that was entirely too much and entirely perfect for her. Eden had responded with 3 fire emojis and a message about finally setting a wedding date with Raymond after everything they had worked through. Simone had sent a rare message, just checking in, asking how everyone was doing in the way that meant she was actually asking. Camille had shared a screenshot of her first week without posting, her follower count unchanged, proving that presence mattered more than constant content. And now they were all asking about Nyla's dinner. She typed slowly. He offered me a job. The responses came immediately. Tasha, what kind of job? Eden, wait, are we being serious right now? Simone, tell us everything. Camille, New York, I need details immediately. She smiled at her phone and started typing the explanation. What Nyla did not know yet was that Tasha's photo from that event was not just Tasha being Tasha. Something had happened at that event. Something Tasha had not told anyone yet. The event was a fundraising gala in Houston for a community arts organization. Tasha had been invited because she was Tasha. She knew someone who knew someone who knew the organizer, and within 48 hours of a single conversation, she had been added to the guest list with a +1 she did not use because Tasha never needed a +1. She was her own event. She had arrived in a deep purple dress that she had found at a vintage store 3 days earlier and altered herself, because Tasha could do things like that. She was loud and warm and immediately became the center of 3 separate conversations within the first 20 minutes. And then she saw him. His name was Dion Kessler. He was standing near the bar, not at the bar, near it. Like he had intended to get a drink and then forgotten because something else had caught his attention. He was tall, dark-skinned, with a close-shaved head and a build that suggested he used his body for something physical before he used it for whatever he used it for now. He was wearing a dark suit that fit him well, but not in the way that suggested he wore suits often. More like he had made an effort for this specific evening, and the effort showed in the right ways. He was watching Tasha. Not in the way men usually watched Tasha, which was with interest and entertainment and the unspoken assumption that she was performing for their benefit. He was watching her the way you watch someone who has made a room lighter just by being in it, and you are trying to understand how they did it. Tasha noticed him noticing. She was Tasha. She noticed everything. But instead of going to him immediately, which is what everyone who knew her would have expected, she stayed where she was. She kept talking to the people around her. She let the awareness sit without acting on it. That was new. After Siesta Key, some things had shifted inside Tasha too. Watching Nyla and Minjae had done something quiet to her understanding of what connection could look like. She had seen a man choose a woman not because she was the loudest or the most visible, but because she was the most real. And somewhere in that observation, Tasha had started asking herself a question she had been avoiding for years. What would it look like if someone chose the real her? Not Tasha the entertainer. Not Tasha the life of the party. Not Tasha the woman who made everyone laugh and filled every silence and turned every room into a celebration. Just Tasha. The one who altered her own dresses at 2 in the morning because she could not sleep. The one who called her mother every Sunday morning and listened for 45 minutes without interrupting. The one who cried alone in her car after funerals because she did not want to make anyone else's grief about her presence. What would it look like if someone saw that woman? Dion found her an hour into the event. He did not approach with a line or a strategy. He just appeared beside her at a moment when the group she was entertaining had temporarily dispersed, and he said, "You changed the temperature of this room when you walked in. I just wanted you to know that someone noticed." She looked at him. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, Tasha did not have a quick response. Not because she was intimidated. Not because she was performing shyness. But because what he said had landed in a place she kept protected, and her usual defenses, the humor, the volume, the deflection, did not activate fast enough to cover it. "Thank you," she said. Just that. He nodded. Then he said, "I'm Dion. I run the after-school program this gala is raising money for." He was not a billionaire. He was not a CEO. He was not someone whose name moved through rooms before he entered them. He ran an after-school arts program for teenagers in 3rd Ward, a historically black neighborhood in Houston that had been fighting against displacement for decades. He had started it with his own money 4 years ago in a converted garage. Now it operated out of a donated community space with 23 regular students and a waiting list of 40 more. He told her this without any of the performing modesty that people sometimes use when describing work they want credit for. He told her like he was just answering a question. Tasha asked more. She asked about the students. She asked about the funding. She asked about the specific challenges of running a program in a neighborhood under pressure from developers. She asked questions she did not normally ask at parties because parties were for being light and easy and uncomplicated. But something about him made her want to be less light. Not heavy. Just real. They talked for 2 hours. At the end of the evening, he gave her his number in the most unpolished way possible. He patted 3 pockets before finding a pen, wrote it on the back of a drink napkin because he did not have a business card on him, and handed it to her with the expression of a man who had not planned this and was not sure what to do with it now that it was happening. "You don't have to call," he said. "But I'd like it if you did." Tasha looked at the napkin. Then she looked at him. "I'll call," she said. She did. The next day. At 7 in the morning, which was obscenely early for Tasha, and she knew it, and she did it anyway because something about this felt like it should not wait for a comfortable hour. He answered on the second ring, already awake, already at the community center setting up for the day's program. They talked for 40 minutes. She called again the next day. And the next. By the end of the first week, Tasha had driven to 3rd Ward to see the after-school program herself. She sat in a folding chair in the corner of the converted community space and watched Dion teach a group of teenagers how to mix paint colors while explaining the history of muralism in Houston. And something inside her chest did something she was not prepared for. It settled. The part of her that was always moving, always performing, always filling space, went quiet for a moment. And in that quiet, she heard something she had been drowning out with noise for years. She wanted to be known. Not just enjoyed. Known. Dion saw her watching from the corner and smiled at her in the way that was not trying to be anything except glad she was there. Tasha smiled back. The real one. She had not told the group chat yet. Not because she was hiding it, but because for the first time in her life, Tasha wanted to hold something close before she shared it. She wanted to understand what it was before she performed it for an audience, even an audience of women she loved. But 3 weeks after that gala, on the same night that Nyla texted the group about Minjae's job offer, Tasha was lying in her Houston apartment looking at the ceiling with her phone on her chest, thinking about a man who ran an after-school program in a converted garage and looked at her like she was more than entertainment. She picked up her phone. She opened the group chat where everyone was still reacting to Nyla's news. She typed slowly, which was something Tasha almost never did. So, I also have news. The chat went silent for exactly 4 seconds. Then every single notification exploded simultaneously. Tasha told them everything. About the gala. About Dion. About the after-school program and the folding chair and the paint colors and the way he had said she changed the temperature of a room and how she had not had a quick response for the first time in her adult life. She told them about calling him at 7 in the morning. About driving to 3rd Ward. About sitting quietly in a corner while teenagers painted and a man she barely knew smiled at her like she was enough exactly as she was. Nyla's response came last. 3 words. He sees you. Tasha stared at those 3 words on her screen for a long time. Then she typed back, I think he does, New York. I think he actually does. 2 weeks later, Nyla flew to Seoul. Not for the job. Not yet. She had not made her decision. She flew to Seoul because Minjae had asked her to come see his world before she decided anything. To understand what she would be stepping into. To meet the people she would be working with. To see the city that had shaped him. The flight was long. 14 hours. She slept some of it and read the rest and thought about how strange life was sometimes. 8 months ago, she had almost canceled a girl's trip because of a work deadline. Now she was flying across the world to consider a career opportunity offered by a man she had met because she helped someone pick up dropped plates at a beach dinner. Minjae met her at the airport himself. Not with a driver. Not with staff. Himself. He was standing in the arrivals area with his hands in his coat pockets, watching the doors, and when he saw her his face did something it rarely did in public. It softened. She walked toward him pulling her single black carry-on bag, the same one she had brought to Florida, and when she reached him he did not immediately speak. He just looked at her like he was confirming something to himself. You came, he said. I said I would. I know. But saying and doing are different. She looked up at him. Have I ever not done what I said I would do? He considered this. No, you have not. Then stop being surprised. He almost smiled. I will try. Seoul was extraordinary. Not in the way she had expected. She had expected modern and impressive and efficient. It was all of those things. But it was also beautiful in ways she had not prepared for. The old neighborhoods nestled against the new towers. The mountains visible from unexpected angles throughout the city. The food markets with their colors and sounds and smells. The quiet residential streets where people had lived for generations. Minjae showed her all of it. Not the tourist version. The real version. The version you only see when someone who belongs there decides to share it with you. He took her to the neighborhood where he grew up, modest apartments that looked nothing like his current life. He showed her the school he attended, the park where he used to sit when he needed to think. He introduced her to his mother over a meal that lasted 3 hours and involved more food than Nyla had ever seen in one sitting. His mother was small and sharp-eyed and spoke limited English, but communicated everything she needed to communicate through the way she looked at her son when he looked at Nyla. She approved. Nyla could tell. On her 3rd night in Seoul, they had dinner at a restaurant that overlooked the city lights. The view was extraordinary. The food was extraordinary. Everything about this world was extraordinary. But what mattered to her was the man sitting across from her, who had built all of this and still looked at her like she was the most interesting thing in any room. I have been thinking about your offer, she said. And? I have conditions. He nodded slowly. Tell me, what do you think of their concerns? She did not hesitate. I think efficiency that ignores the people living in these communities is just displacement with better marketing. If we want this project to actually work, to create sustainable change instead of just profitable change, we have to do it this way. It takes longer. But it lasts. The room was quiet. Min-jae nodded once. "We do it her way," he said. And that was the end of the discussion. The project took 18 months. It was hard, complicated, full of unexpected obstacles and political resistance and moments when Nyla wondered if she had made the right decision, leaving her old career behind. But it worked. The community center opened to a neighborhood that had been involved in every stage of its creation. The affordable housing units went to families who had lived in the area for generations. The green spaces were designed based on actual input from the people who would use them. And when the project was complete, the residents did not feel like something had been done to their neighborhood. They felt like something had been done with them. That was the difference Nyla had always wanted to make. And now she had the resources to make it at scale. During those same 18 months, Tasha moved to Houston. Nobody saw that coming. Least of all Tasha. She had always been the one who moved between cities like they were rooms in a house, never quite settling, never quite committing to any geography because commitment felt like the opposite of freedom. But Dion's world was in Third Ward. His program was in Third Ward. His students were there. His life was planted, and the roots went deep. And Tasha discovered something she had never expected. She wanted roots too. She started volunteering at the program full-time. Then she started running the community outreach. Then she started writing grant proposals with the same energy she had once used to dominate rooms at parties. It turned out that the skills that made Tasha the most magnetic person at any social event, the ability to connect, to make strangers feel seen, to turn cold rooms warm, were exactly the skills that made her extraordinary at community work. Within a year, the program had tripled its funding. Dion looked at her across the community center one afternoon while she was simultaneously on the phone with a potential donor and helping a student fix a canvas that had fallen. And he shook his head slowly with the expression of a man who still could not believe what had walked into his life. "You are the most ridiculous woman I have ever known," he said later. Ridiculous good or ridiculous bad? Ridiculous extraordinary. She grinned. The real one. The one that had always been there underneath the performance. On the night of the community center opening in Miami, Min-jae found Nyla standing alone on the rooftop of the building, looking out at the neighborhood below. He had come from Seoul specifically for this. Rearranged his entire schedule. Flown 14 hours to be here for one evening. Because it mattered to her. And what mattered to her mattered to him. "You should be downstairs celebrating," he said, coming to stand beside her at the railing. "I will be. I just needed a minute." He nodded. He understood needing minutes. They stood together looking at the neighborhood lights, the community center glowing warmly below them, the sounds of celebration drifting up from the streets. "I am proud of you," he said. "I know. Does it feel like you thought it would feel?" She considered the question honestly. Better. And harder. And different. That sounds accurate. This man who had noticed her when she was not trying to be noticed. Who had chosen her when she was not competing to be chosen. Who had offered her not just himself, but a chance to do work that actually mattered. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing me. Before I was ready to be seen." He reached over and took her hand. Just held it. Simple and warm. "I did not see something that was not there," he said. "I just saw what was there when everyone else was looking at something louder." She leaned into him slightly, her shoulder against his arm. "I love you," she said. She had said it before. But it still felt like something worth saying. "I love you too," he said. "I have loved you since a beach in Florida when you helped a stranger pick up plates without making it a performance." That is a very specific moment to identify. It was a very specific moment. She smiled. The real one. The one he had earned. Below them, the celebration continued. Above them, the stars were doing their usual quiet work. And between them, something that had started as an accident and become a choice and grown into a life continued to build itself one moment at a time. 3 years after a summer reunion that was supposed to be simple, Nyla Bennett stood in a hotel ballroom in Seoul accepting an award for community-centered development. The project in Miami had led to projects in Atlanta and Seoul and eventually 4 other cities. Her approach had become a model that other developers were starting to study and replicate. She was being recognized not because of who she was with, but because of what she had built. Min-jae sat in the front row watching her. Not on stage with her. Not accepting anything on her behalf. Just sitting in the audience like everyone else, watching the woman he loved receive recognition she had earned entirely on her own. When she finished her speech and the applause began, she found his face in the crowd. He was smiling. Not the public smile he used in meetings. The real one. The rare one. The one she had earned. Tasha was not at the award ceremony. She was in Houston, at the community center, helping Bria, now 17, prepare her college application portfolio. But she had sent Nyla a voice message that morning that Nyla had listened to 3 times before the event. New York. I just want you to know that I am proud of you in a way I cannot even put into proper words. You walked into a villa in Florida with 1 bag and no interest in impressing anyone, and you became the most impressive person in every room since. I love you. Now go get that award, and do not you dare cry on that stage, because I am not there to hand you a tissue, and I refuse to be replaced. Nyla had laughed. And then almost cried. And then pulled herself together, because Tasha was right about the tissue situation. Later that night, in the quiet of their hotel suite, Min-jae handed her another envelope. Not a job offer this time, he said. She looked at him. Then what? Open it. She opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. The beach in Siesta Key where they had first talked. But in the photograph, someone had built something new on the sand. A small structure. Temporary but intentional. She looked closer. It was an archway. Decorated simply with white fabric and flowers. She looked up at him. He was not kneeling. That was not his way. He was standing in front of her, hands at his sides, completely still. I am asking now, he said simply. If you want to. She looked at the photograph. Then at him. Yes, she said. No dramatic pause. No tears. No performance. Just the answer she had known she would give since a balcony conversation in Florida about the loneliness that lives in full rooms. He let out a breath he had apparently been holding and pulled her close. They stood together in the quiet hotel suite in Seoul, the city lights glittering through the window, 3 years of building something real behind them and an entire future ahead. And Nyla Bennett, the woman who had almost canceled a girl's trip because of a work deadline, let herself be held by the man who had noticed her first because she was exactly herself. The wedding happened 6 months later. On a private beach in Siesta Key. The same beach where everything began. Tasha was there, loud and joyful and crying before the ceremony even started, with Dion beside her in a suit he clearly did not wear often and a smile that said he was exactly where he was supposed to be. His hand rested on Tasha's back while she cried, not trying to stop her tears, just being there while she felt them. The same way he had been there since a gala in Houston when he told her she changed the temperature of a room and she could not find a single word to say back. Eden was there with Raymond, their marriage finally on solid ground after everything they had worked through. Simone was there looking more relaxed than anyone had ever seen her, having finally left her corporate position for work that actually fed her soul. Camille was there, still creating content, but differently now, more honest, more real, having discovered that her audience actually preferred the unfiltered version of herself. 5 women who had rented a luxury villa for one unforgettable vacation stood together again on the same beach, watching one of them marry the man who had recognized her value before she was trying to prove it. Nyla wore white. Simple. Elegant. Exactly herself. Min-jae wore a perfectly tailored dark suit with his sleeves appropriately long for a wedding, though Nyla knew exactly what was underneath them. When he saw her walking toward him across the sand, his face did what it always did when he saw her. It softened. And she smiled. The real one. The one he had earned. And that is where we leave them. Not at an ending. At a beginning that has finally found its shape. But before you go, I want to leave you with something to think about. This story gave us 2 love stories. Not 1. 2. Nyla was the quiet one. The one who never performed. The one who was chosen because she was exactly herself, no adjustments, no performance, no competition. And Tasha. Tasha was the loud one. The one everyone saw first. The one who filled every room and every silence and made everyone around her feel alive. But underneath all that light and noise was a woman who was terrified that if she stopped performing, nobody would stay. Dion stayed. Not because of the performance, because of what was underneath it. And that is the lesson both stories share. The right person does not fall in love with the version of you that you perform. They fall in love with the version you are afraid to show. The quiet one. The heavy one. The one you protect behind the noise and the smiles and the carefully built walls. Nyla was already living as her real self. She just needed someone brave enough to see it. Tasha had buried her real self underneath years of being the entertaining one. She needed someone patient enough to wait for her to put the performance down. Both women were found. Both women were chosen. Not despite who they really were. Because of it. Now here is the question I want to leave with you today. Which one are you? Are you the Nyla, already real but waiting to be seen? Or are you the Tasha, performing so well that even you have forgotten who is underneath? And either way, are you brave enough to let someone in? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And I know this one is going to start a conversation. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Share it with the quiet friend who thinks nobody notices her. Share it with the loud friend who is secretly exhausted from carrying the room. Share it with anyone who has ever been afraid that their real self is not enough. It is enough. It has always been enough. Subscribe if you are new here. Turn on notifications. And remember what this story taught us from the very beginning. Peace is not passive. For some of us, it is the most powerful thing we carry. And love, real love, does not ask you to become someone else. It finds you exactly where you are and says, I see you. Stay. See you in the next one.